Right now, as you are watching this, the global economy is being reshaped by a war that most mainstream media is dramatically underreporting. A war against Iran. And I'm not just talking about missiles and military operations. I'm talking about something that touches every single person on this planet. The price of food, the price of fuel, and the stability of the financial system you depend on every single day. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what is happening, why it matters for you, and why the most credible economists are now saying we are heading into the worst economic depression since the 1930s. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand this crisis at a deeper level than most politicians, most journalists, and frankly, most economists are willing to publicly admit. Let's start from the very beginning. Let's get one thing straight immediately. This war is not about nuclear weapons. It is not about ideology. It is not even really about Iran specifically. This war is about oil. And more precisely, it is about who controls the flow of oil to the entire world. Think about this for a moment. Every country on Earth needs energy. Every factory, every car, every ship, every hospital, all of it runs on oil and gas. Whoever controls the supply of that oil holds enormous geopolitical leverage over every nation on the planet. The United States understands this perfectly. And for the past several decades, American foreign policy has been organized around one central goal: ensuring that no country can access oil and gas without going through a system that the United States controls or heavily influences. Look at the pattern. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq. Iraq sits on the fifth largest proven oil reserves in the world. Within years, American oil companies had signed major contracts there. Then Libya, Syria, Venezuela, where the elected president was removed and oil operations came under American authority. And now Iran, which sits on the fourth largest proven oil reserves on Earth, holding approximately 157 billion barrels. This is not a coincidence. This is a consistent, decades-long strategy. The goal is control of what economists call the choke points, the critical passages and supply lines through which the world's energy must flow. The most important choke point in the world is the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 21 million barrels of oil pass through this narrow passage every single day. That represents about 21% of total global oil consumption. When that strait is disrupted, the entire global economy feels it within days. And that is exactly what is happening right now. Now, here is where things get really dangerous. Because the global financial system is not just connected to oil, it is dependent on it in ways that most people have never been taught to understand. Let me take you back to 2008, the global financial crisis. Banks collapsed, mortgage markets imploded, the world economy nearly fell off a cliff. The response from the US Federal Reserve and governments across the Western world was to push interest rates down to essentially zero. Near zero interest rates for over a decade. What did that do? It made borrowing money almost free. And when money is almost free, investors borrow enormous amounts of it and pour it into assets: real estate, stocks, corporate bonds, private equity funds. The entire post-2008 economic recovery was not built on factories producing more goods or workers earning higher wages. American wages have been essentially flat since 2008. 40% of Americans today have no savings at all, zero. Instead, the recovery was built on rising asset prices. Your house became worth more, stock prices went up, corporate bonds paid returns. And because banks and pension funds and private equity companies had borrowed massively to buy these assets, as long as asset prices kept rising, everything looked fine. This is what economists call a Ponzi dynamic. The system only works if it keeps growing. The moment it stops growing, the debt becomes unpayable. Now add high energy prices to this picture. When energy prices spike, companies cannot afford their operating costs. They cannot service their debts. Defaults begin. And when defaults begin in a system built on overlapping debt obligations, the collapse does not slow down gradually. It accelerates exponentially. Interest rates on 30-year mortgages have now crossed 5%. The 10-year US Treasury bond is yielding 4.5%. The zero interest rate era is over, and a financial system that was designed to function only in a world of cheap money is now being stress tested by expensive money, at exactly the same moment that energy supplies are being disrupted. This is extraordinarily dangerous. Let's move beyond oil for a moment, because the Iran crisis is not only disrupting energy, it is disrupting several other critical supply chains simultaneously. First, fertilizer. The Middle East, and Iran in particular, is a major supplier of ammonia and nitrogen-based fertilizers to global agricultural markets. These are not luxury goods. They are the chemical inputs that allow modern farming to produce enough food to feed 8 billion people. Right now, Iran is blocking fertilizer exports through the Strait of Hormuz. The world is entering its spring planting season. Farmers from India to Brazil to West Africa are trying to buy fertilizer, and the supply is constrained, which means prices are rising sharply. When fertilizer prices rise, food production falls. When food production falls, food prices rise. And when food prices rise, the people who suffer first and worst are the world's poorest populations, in Africa, in South Asia, in Latin America. We are looking at a genuine global food security crisis unfolding in real time. Second, helium. This is one that almost nobody is talking about. Iran is a significant source of helium exports, and helium is not just what fills balloons at birthday parties. Helium is a critical industrial gas used in MRI machines in hospitals, in semiconductor manufacturing, in fiber optic cable production, and in aerospace technology. The helium supply from the Middle East has been significantly disrupted. Companies that relied on these supplies are already cutting allocations. The knock-on effects for medical technology and semiconductor production could take months to fully materialize, but they are coming. Third, the compounding effect. Here is what makes this crisis so severe. It is not one disruption. It is multiple simultaneous disruptions hitting a global economy that was already fragile, already over-leveraged, and already showing signs of slowing growth. Energy disruption, plus fertilizer disruption, plus financial system stress, plus rising interest rates, plus trade route uncertainty. When you add all of these together, you are not looking at a recession. You are looking at something that leading economists are now comparing directly to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now let's look at Europe, because the situation there may actually be even worse than in the United States. Europe is not energy independent. After the Ukraine conflict began in 2022, Europe committed to reducing its dependence on Russian gas and oil. Germany, which had built its entire industrial model on cheap Russian gas, began dismantling that relationship. The results have been devastating. Germany's GDP has been contracting. Its industrial output is falling. Energy costs for German manufacturers have risen so dramatically that multiple major companies have begun relocating production outside of Europe entirely. And now Europe is doubling down on this mistake. By May of this year, European nations plan to fully halt Russian oil and gas imports. Russia, seeing no reason to maintain the old arrangements, has signalled it will terminate its long-term contracts with Europe and redirect those exports to Asian markets, where demand is growing and where buyers are not imposing politically motivated restrictions. Europe is cutting itself off from Russian energy at precisely the moment when Middle Eastern energy supplies are also being disrupted by the Iran conflict. The two crises are happening simultaneously. Meanwhile, European defence spending is rising sharply. Germany's government is explicitly calling for cuts to social spending, healthcare, pensions, welfare, to free up money for military budgets. The argument being made to European citizens is we need to spend more on defence to protect ourselves from Russia. But here is the reality. Russia's strategic focus has shifted dramatically toward Asia. The idea that Russia is preparing to invade Western Europe is not supported by any credible military analysis. What is supported by the evidence is that Europe is choosing to spend enormous sums on weapons systems, while simultaneously destroying its own industrial base by cutting off affordable energy. The result will be European economies that look increasingly like Germany today, shrinking, deindustrializing, with rising unemployment and falling living standards. And the European population is going to face a very difficult winter, literally. Now, what about the other major powers? How are China and India responding to all of this? China has been watching the United States systematically cut off energy supplies to any country that resists American policy directives. China imports approximately 10 to 11 million barrels of oil per day, making it the world's largest oil importer. Roughly 40% of that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The war against Iran is, from Beijing's perspective, a direct attack on China's energy security. Not a symbolic attack, a literal, material attack on China's ability to keep its factories running and its economy growing. This is why you are seeing China accelerate its infrastructure investments across Central Asia, why you are seeing China deepen its financial relationships with Russia, and why you are seeing China participate in building alternative payment systems that do not depend on the US dollar. India faces a similar situation. India had been under significant American pressure to reduce its purchases of Russian oil following the Ukraine conflict. American diplomats had essentially convinced India to shift toward more expensive Middle Eastern and American oil supplies. And now, with the Middle Eastern supply in crisis, those American assurances look hollow. India is being pushed back toward Russia as its primary energy supplier, not because of ideology, but because of basic economic necessity. The United States finds itself in the strange position of having pressured India away from Russian oil, only to have the crisis it created force India right back to Russia. This is the strategic incoherence of the current American approach. The attempt to control global energy flows is actively pushing the world's two largest developing economies, China and India, together representing nearly 3 billion people, into closer alignment with each other and with Russia. Let me be very direct with you now, because I think this is the most important thing I can say in this entire video. What we are witnessing is not a temporary disruption. It is not a cyclical recession that will self-correct in 18 months. It is not a political blip that will be resolved when the next election cycle arrives. What we are witnessing is the end of an era. The post-World War II international order, built around American dollar dominance, American military supremacy, open global trade, international institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, that system is collapsing. Not slowly declining, collapsing. And critically, it is not collapsing because foreign powers defeated it. It is collapsing because American foreign policy has systematically destroyed the conditions that made it work. Think about what international order requires. It requires trust. Countries need to believe that the rules will be applied consistently, that contracts will be honoured, that sovereignty will be respected. The moment a hegemonic power begins ignoring those rules when they become inconvenient, seizing foreign reserves, imposing unilateral sanctions, launching military attacks without UN authorization, the entire system of trust begins to unravel. The United States has been doing exactly this, with increasing frequency and boldness for over 2 decades. And the rest of the world has been watching and drawing conclusions. The conclusion they are drawing is this: we cannot rely on an American-led international order to protect our interests. We need our own institutions, our own payment systems, our own energy security arrangements, our own military deterrence. This process of decoupling from the American-led system is now accelerating rapidly. The war against Iran has functioned as a catalyst, forcing countries that were hesitating to make their choice. A new world is being organized, and while we should be honest that this new world faces enormous challenges and uncertainties, we should also be clear that the old world is not coming back. The question now, and this is perhaps the most important question of our time, is what replaces it? What new international institutions, what new trade frameworks, what new financial architecture will govern a multipolar world? That is a conversation that desperately needs to happen and is happening far too slowly. Let me close with this. The stock market may bounce. Politicians will make announcements. There will be temporary ceasefires and diplomatic statements and press conferences. Do not be fooled by any of that. The underlying structural damage is real. The fertilizer supply disruption is real. The energy market disruption is real. The financial system fragility is real. The deindustrialization of Europe is real. The acceleration of the multipolar transition is real. What is happening right now is going to affect your cost of living, your job security, the stability of your pension, the price of your groceries, and the geopolitical world your children will inherit. Understanding it clearly and honestly is the first step to navigating it. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening, please share it, because the conversations we need to have about what comes next cannot happen if people do not understand what is happening now. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.